Good morning, Sasbo members, fellow colleagues, everybody who will be watching this podcast. Today we have a special guest in our midst, Mr. Eugene Ebersohn. He is the Assistant General Secretary for the Standard Bank portfolio, and today we will be discussing the salary negotiation outcomes for 2026-2027.
Good morning, Keanu. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. So we're going to jump into it quickly. We're going to get it out of the way, and I'm sure we have a lot to discuss. Firstly, I want to ask you to take us back to the beginning. What was the overall mood of members walking into the salary negotiations this year?
I think members will always want, a good settlement. People in the finance sector work hard, got targets, they are driven, and they expect some sort of good reward when it comes to the outcome of salary negotiations. So we went through the mandate, and the mandate was, I suppose, in line with inflation, but it was still, maybe I can call it unreasonable to a certain extent, because members want more. So there's always pressure on both negotiating teams, the bank and Sasbo, when we start negotiations.
Speaking about the inflation, what was it currently sitting at when negotiations started?
Well, the year-on-year inflation, the latest figures we had when we negotiated in January was the November figure. So the year-on-year inflation between November 2024 and November 2025 was 3.6%. So that means the buying power of members decreased by 3.6% over that period. We didn't have anything available after that, although negotiations took place in January. We also don't know what inflation is going to be in March 2026, a couple of months later. Stats SA only releases those figures later. The average inflation for 2025 was 3.2%. So that as a starting base is what the bank would want to aim at and say, you were able to buy 100 bottles of milk in the previous year. Inflation has deteriorated that. You can only buy 97 bottles of milk. So if we give you a salary increase and you're again able to buy 100 bottles of milk, you're exactly where you were, doing the same job as what you did last year, and to do the same job the following year. So our aim would be to increase your buying power. In other words, any settlement that we get above inflation will be a win. Now, how much above inflation is a question that nobody can definitively answer. If you beat inflation, fantastic. If you're slightly above inflation, you'll be disappointed. If you get double inflation, obviously going to be a fantastic settlement.
Interesting. I guess you've answered one of my questions. I wanted to know, what would you consider the biggest win from this agreement? And you just said there that it is beating, coming above inflation. So what would you say were the key expectations from members in the bank going into the process?
I think, as always, they want to better their lives. I think it's human nature. Last year you couldn't afford something, maybe didn't get promoted, so the next thing you want to do is have a bigger salary and buy those things that you couldn't afford, or buy your child something that you couldn't afford last year, or maybe buy a new TV that you couldn't afford last year. It's human nature just to improve your life, your standard of living. And if we are able to achieve that, then fantastic. So this year the settlement was 5.5%, so we can call it, say, almost 2% above inflation. Inflation 3.6 when we started negotiations, 5.5, that's almost 2% better. In the bigger scheme of things, that's significant. Members will always want more, I know that. And what I also know is the bank would always want less, because the salary bill in the bank is quite significant. So I think that would be the gain. The top three performance categories got 5.3% or 5.2%, I beg your pardon. So that's still more than 1.5% above inflation. So the top performing categories, I think something like 66% of staff, general staff in the bank, were rated in the top two performance categories, and they're obviously going to get much better increases. So for that point, I'm quite happy with the settlement.
Going into these negotiations, were there any tough moments or turning points that really stood out?
Yes, as far as I can recall, the bank started at 1.7% or 2% is what their opening offer was. It was tough negotiations. Last year we settled at 5.5%, and I know for a fact the bank stopped at 4.8% last year, not 2025. And they said, that's it. We're not moving any further. By that time, we already knew what the settlements Nedbank and Absa was going to be, and we told them that. The bank then went back to their principals, and they came back with a 1% is extra, which means that's why the settlement is at 5.8%, and it's a take it or leave it situation. So this year, the bank was standing at 4.8% again, and we said to them, we're seriously not hoping that you are settling at 5%. If it's not something similar to what last year's settlement was, then obviously we're going to have a problem and probably a dispute. And remember, the bank doesn't want that. They want to keep their staff motivated. They want them to go out there and open products or sell products to their clientele and maybe new clients. We then broke, and the bank came back with. So I'm 99% certain that the bank wanted to settle at 5%. They then came back the next day and said, this is it. Can't move any further, 5.5%. But it's not only the size of the cake, it's often the distribution of that cake is more important for our members. They've told us in mandates that we sent out, it's the overnight is less important than the guaranteed minimum. Then they know what they can get, and they know what they can budget for going forward. So the settlement distribution proposal was good. And then obviously we haven't spoken about the bonuses yet. The bonuses was 7.25%. As I said a little bit earlier, the top two performance categories, representing 66% of the staff, are going to get a bonus of at least 7%. So I think that is quite significant. The staff in the time to step up performance category are only going to get a 5% bonus, which is still a very good bonus. But we are happy that 2/3 of the staff are going to get a 7% bonus. And often we get accused that we mustn't focus too much on the lower performance categories and focus more on the upper levels of the performance categories. And this year, 66% were in the top two performance categories. I'll be happy about that. Staff that were rated as time to step up, they would have been disappointed in their bonus, in their salary increases, because that's directly linked to inflation. So they will still be able to buy their 100 bottles of milk, but nothing more. But that only represents 1.5% of the general staff. So it's very few people really that's in that performance category. So for the whole, I'm comfortable with the settlement. I often say, I'm answering questions that you haven't posed, but once I get going, I get going. I always say, I don't expect members to be happy with the settlement, because members would want more. Did I get a good salary increase? No, I would have wanted more. You get a good salary increase? No, you would have wanted more. But would Standard Bank have wanted to settle lower than what they did? Absolutely. Sasbo have wanted to settle higher? Absolutely. But if we walk away from the negotiating table and I'm a little bit unhappy, but the bank is equally unhappy with the settlement, then it's probably a good settlement. If I sell my second-hand cell phone to you, I want 1,000 Rand for it and you want to give me 200 Rand. Somewhere in between we're going to settle. If we're equally unhappy or equally unhappy, probably a good deal. But this is situation in the employer-employee relationship is a little bit different, because you can walk away if I don't want to budge. But if we both feel we can live with it, then that's a reasonable, acceptable outcome.
Touching on one of the topics that sometimes is, I don't think members really understand this, and they don't really get the feel of how this can impact a necessary outcome when it comes to negotiations. But what would you say, how important is member unity and participation when it comes to achieving these nice outcomes that you've achieved in Standard Bank?
I think solidarity amongst our members is crucial, if members don't stand together, they don't give the union the support, it makes our arm weaker at the negotiating table. Our office sit across the negotiating table and we talk about a specific environment where our membership is low. So as an example, in the head office departments, we will say to the bank, our members are demanding this, or they have rejected this, or they want changes to certain hours, or whatever the case may be. I know that the bank is sitting there and they're nodding their heads, and in the back of their mind they're saying, Sasbo, only like 52% of the staff that report to me are members of Sasbo. What about the other 48%? They're perfectly happy with whatever I do to them, whatever we propose. They're just going to accept it because they haven't joined the union. But if 100 people, 100% of the staff are members, and we go to the bank and we say, members are unhappy about A, B, or C, the bank's going to know, okay, well, the union knows what they're talking about because they've got the full support of all the members. That makes it very, very easy to negotiate from a position of power, as opposed to half the staff not belonging to the union. And then the bank knows that, they're fully aware of what our percentages are. And that makes it weaker. So participating in the mandate process, we go back for a referral to our members. It's important that they provide us with a unified answer and a response and support.
And lastly, if you could leave our members with one message about where things are heading next, what would that be?
I think the world of work is changing. We keep talking to our members about AI and technology creeping into the workplace, not just the finance sector, but all over. I think members must make sure that they are ready, that they're tech savvy, that they don't just focus on their job. They've got time and opportunity. Go onto courses in the bank, upskill yourself, not necessarily to immediately have a change in your job or to apply for another job, but just to be advanced and be ahead of the step before those changes come, that you know what those changes are and that you are ready for tomorrow's work. Because it's changing. Artificial intelligence is significantly going to change our way of work and the future we're going to live in. And the finance sector employees need to get ready for that as well.
Couldn't agree anymore with you. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to hosting you again on the Sasbo Round Table and to discuss more in depth about member issues, maybe some more salary negotiations or whatever else is happening in the banks.
Thank you, Keanu.